It was a quiet Saturday morning. I was just enjoying my coffee on the porch, like I always do. The sun was out, birds were chirping, and everything seemed normal, until I saw a group of people walking toward my property. They looked official at first. Matching shirts, clipboards, and even little badges. One of them had a walkie-talkie. The whole setup screamed authority, or at least they thought it did. They marched right up to my front yard like they owned the place. No greeting. No introduction. Just straight-up attitude. One of them pointed at my car and said, "That vehicle violates HOA guidelines. It needs to be moved immediately." I raised an eyebrow. My car. It's parked on my own driveway. Not on the street. Not blocking anything. But they weren't done. They pointed at my grass next. "It's too long," one of them said. "You'll be fined." Now here's the thing. You'd think I live in some strict, rule-crazy neighborhood. I don't. We don't even have a real HOA. Just a casual neighborhood group that shares tips on lawn care and sends out the occasional newsletter. But these people acted like they were federal agents cracking down on a crime ring. Something felt off. They were too aggressive, too confident, and just weirdly organized. I asked them who they were with. That's when one of them flashed a homemade-looking badge and said, "We're the HOA enforcement team. And if you don't comply, we'll have to report you. Or arrest you." Arrest me? That's when I knew this was going to get interesting. Because what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly guess, is that I'm not just a homeowner. I'm also the county sheriff. And this little stunt they pulled? It was about to backfire hard. The whole thing started the same way it always does. Just another slow weekend. I was off duty, wearing a hoodie and sweatpants. Nothing about me screamed law enforcement. My house is in a quiet neighborhood. We've got friendly neighbors, kids riding bikes, and the occasional barbecue. Nothing fancy. It's not even a gated community. Just regular people living regular lives. That's why this whole HOA patrol thing caught me off guard. We have a neighborhood association, sure, but it's informal. It doesn't collect fees or enforce rules. It definitely doesn't send people door to door with clipboards and threats. That's why I knew something didn't add up the moment they showed up. They were walking in formation like they'd practiced. 2 in front, 1 in back, and one holding a notebook like he was about to write a ticket. It would have been funny if they weren't so serious about it. They didn't ask questions, they gave orders. Told me I had 3 violations. Said they'd been monitoring my property. One of them even said I'd been warned before, which was news to me. I looked around, wondering if my neighbors were watching. A couple windows had blinds slightly pulled. People were definitely curious, but no one wanted to get involved. And honestly, I didn't blame them. These folks were acting like wannabe cops, and some people get nervous around that. I stayed calm and played along at first. I wanted to see just how far they'd go. One guy, probably the self-declared leader, kept talking like he had legal power. He quoted fake regulations and kept repeating phrases like code compliance and property standards review. None of it meant anything, but they sure acted like it did. They had no idea who they were talking to, and I wasn't about to stop them. Not yet. The leader of the group stepped forward like he was some kind of military commander. He squinted at me, then flipped open a tiny notebook. "You're in violation of Section 4B, he said, like it meant something. I didn't say a word. I just let him keep going. Apparently, my truck was non-compliant. Why? Because it was too large and too loud for community standards. Mind you, it's a standard pickup, nothing flashy, nothing illegal. It's registered, clean, and parked right in my driveway. But that didn't stop him. We've had several complaints, he added, as he flipped another page. I almost laughed. I've lived here for years and never heard a single person complain. Then another member of the group chimed in. This one looked younger, nervous, like he was trying too hard to act tough. He pointed to the side of my house and said, "Your trash bins are visible from the street. That's a code violation." At this point, I was getting impressed with their creativity. They were making up rules on the spot. Confidently, too. The third person, the one with the walkie-talkie, stepped back and said, "Should we call this in?" That got my attention. Call what in? To who? They started whispering among themselves, pretending to be deciding my fate. The whole thing was bizarre. It was like they were acting out some fantasy they'd all agreed to play. One even said, "If you refuse to cooperate, we'll be forced to detain you until proper authorities arrive." That's when I knew they were either clueless or incredibly bold. Because threatening to detain someone without authority? That crosses a line. A big one. And I was starting to get curious just how far they were willing to take this little show. I decided it was time to push back. Just a little. Still calm, still casual. I looked at the one holding the notebook and asked, "Can I see some ID?" He blinked. "We don't need ID," he said. "We're part of the HOA enforcement team." I nodded slowly. "Right, but what's your name?" That's when he paused. You could see him trying to think of something that sounded official. Finally, he muttered, "Officer Daniels." No last name. No badge number. Just, "Officer Daniels." Then I asked, "Who exactly sent you?" That made the whole group shift a bit. The guy with the walkie-talkie suddenly looked down at his shoes. Another one spoke up and said, "The board." I smiled and asked, "Which board?" No answer. Just awkward silence. Now they were starting to sweat. They thought I'd just roll over and accept their nonsense. Instead, I was calmly asking questions they weren't ready for. That's when they started getting defensive. The leader crossed his arms and said, "You're being non-compliant. We could escalate this." I tilted my head. "Escalate it how?" He looked at the others, then back at me. "We'll call the sheriff," he said. That's when I almost laughed out loud. These people had no idea. They were threatening to call me. I leaned in slightly and said, "You sure you want to do that?" His eyes narrowed. "We're trained for situations like this," he said, clearly bluffing. I was still playing along, but I could tell they were running out of steam. Their story didn't add up, their confidence was fading, and none of them had a real answer to any of my questions. But I wasn't done watching the show. Not yet. I let a few seconds pass before I said anything. Then I pulled out my wallet, flipped it open, and showed them my badge. Real, shiny, official. "You were about to call the sheriff?" I said. "Good news. He's already here." You should have seen their faces. The tough guy in front went pale. His mouth actually opened, but no sound came out. The one with the walkie-talkie took a step back like I'd just drawn a weapon. Even the kid with the notebook looked like he was about to bolt. I stayed calm. "So," I said, "you were about to detain me, right? On whose authority?" No answer. I kept going. "Impersonating law enforcement. Making threats. Trespassing." That's already a nice little list. Now they were panicking. The leader finally found his voice. We weren't impersonating anyone. We're just enforcing neighborhood rules." I raised an eyebrow. With fake badges and threats of arrest? His hands started to shake. "It was just community service," he said. That's when I reached for my phone. "Let's get some real officers down here to sort this out. I'm off duty, but this isn't something I can ignore." The guy with the walkie-talkie actually said, "Wait, can we just leave?" I didn't say yes or no. I just started dialing. They didn't wait around. They scattered like cockroaches. Walked fast, but not quite running. Still trying to look like they were in control, even as they retreated. I stood there on the porch, phone still in hand, watching them disappear down the street. I wasn't angry. Just amazed. They showed up pretending to be in charge. Gave speeches. Issued fake warnings. And all along, they were completely clueless about who they were messing with. After they scurried off, I went ahead and called it in. Not an emergency, but definitely something that needed to be on record. Dispatch took it seriously right away. Impersonating authority isn't a joke, even if it's just in some neighborhood power trip. A patrol unit showed up in less than 15 minutes. I gave them the whole story. Showed them where it happened, described each person, even pointed out the direction they walked off. I also mentioned the fake badge, the clipboard, and the walkie-talkie nonsense. One of the officers shook his head and said, "We've actually had a couple complaints like this lately. Might be the same group." Turns out this wasn't just a one-time thing. These people had been making rounds in different neighborhoods, pulling the same act. Pretending to be HOA enforcement, threatening fines, and trying to get people to pay fees on the spot. Scammers with clipboards, basically. The patrol officers took down my statement and said they'd loop in detectives. I offered to help however I could. After all, they tried to detain a sheriff on his own property. That takes a special kind of stupid. Later that week, I heard through the grapevine that at least one of them had been tracked down. Apparently, he'd tried the same stunt in a nearby neighborhood and someone else reported it. Charges were pending: impersonation, trespassing, and attempted fraud. I didn't need revenge. Just accountability. People like that always push too far, thinking no one will stand up to them. This time, they picked the wrong house. They thought they were the ones in charge, writing fake rules and flashing fake badges. But the law isn't a game. And pretending to enforce it, that's not something you just walk away from. Since that day, things in the neighborhood have been pretty quiet. Word spread fast about what happened. I didn't go around bragging or anything, but people talk. A few neighbors even came by to thank me, saying those same fake enforcers had been bothering them too. Most just didn't know how to handle it, or assumed it was real. That's the scary part. These people looked just believable enough. A matching shirt, a fake badge, a serious tone, that's all it takes sometimes. And when folks don't know their rights, they get pushed around. It's why these kinds of people keep doing it. They count on you being unsure, or too polite to say no. But here's the thing, you don't have to be a sheriff to stand your ground. You just have to ask questions. Real authority can always answer. Real law enforcement won't get nervous if you ask for ID. They won't threaten you with vague rules. And they definitely won't try to arrest you over a trash bin. Looking back, I'm still amazed at how far they were willing to take it. They weren't just acting tough, they believed their own lies. That's what makes people dangerous sometimes. When they're so deep in their fantasy of power, they can't even see how ridiculous they've become. This wasn't about HOA rules. It wasn't even about the truck or the trash cans. It was about control. About a group of entitled people who thought they could make up rules and force others to obey. But every now and then, they run into someone who pushes back. Someone who knows exactly where the line is, and what happens when you cross it. And on that day, that someone just happened to be me.